players will create in the future and build and bring into Star Atlas. So we do believe in a future wherein we're building the tools necessary to enable this type of activity from innovators all over the world. And so in terms of content, right now it is pretty exclusive. Our marketplace is dedicated to all of those Star Atlas assets that we've been building. NFT asset classes that we'll be creating include things like ships, components, crew members, buildings, structures, land. Essentially any observable asset inside the Star Atlas universe is going to be an NFT that can be owned by a player or a group or collective of players. What was really critical for us is we really try to embody the ideology of decentralization, open source technology, and inclusion. And as a component of that, we built our entire marketplace on Web3 protocols. So the method in which we deliver content and execute on sales today, that was all built on Serum decentralized exchange code. So you're already transacting exclusively on chain anytime you purchase an asset from us, or in the future. And even today, users are able to take assets that they own and sell them on a peer-to-peer basis, again, directly through Serum Dex, which is the core integration into our marketplace.
Thank you, Michael. So before I add on to that, I think Simran, you have some questions. Would you like to speak up right now?
Yeah, I do have a few questions, but maybe you should finish your point first because I might change the topic.
Oh, okay, sure, no worries. So when it comes to market design, designing the market, designing the parameters of how the market is created, it's not to say that you should be fully open UGC, closed UGC, or no UGC at all. It really depends on what you're looking to build. So for example, in Star Atlas case, there's a very targeted output, very targeted roadmap to follow, and a semi UGC is relevant, where the creators or the developers are the one creating all the UGC. Whereas for another kind of game, like say Sandbox, where it's basically Minecraft kind of model, and you need a lot of UGC, and so it's really open. What we're trying to share is that these are different parameters that you can customize and you can design based on your game. So in Star Atlas case, it's quite of a closed loop UGC for now. Great, and we're going to move on to mechanism design in all the different aspects. Simran, is your question regarding that aspect or something else? Oops. Okay, raise your hand again later when you want to ask your question. But now I'll pass the floor to Kiefer to talk a little bit more about mechanism design, which are rules of the game.
Thanks, Lisa. So in examining mechanism design, there are a lot of different components, but the three primary ones that I want to touch on are looking at the revenue model that any particular game chooses to employ, their general business model, and how governance gets integrated into the system. So I'll give an overview of each of these, and then for each of the categories, have a question for Michael, and seeing how Star Atlas is pursuing each of these different components. So starting off looking at the revenue model, there are a variety of ways that games could choose to allocate revenue to the NFT asset owners. And the ideal method is really going to depend on which types of users and which types of activities that you're trying to provide incentives for. So one option is providing direct revenue directly to the NFT asset holders. So providing revenue regardless of them actually doing anything with the NFT. And this incentivizes passive investors, but not so much of actually using that NFT. Other directions you can go are incentivizing that asset usage. So as a simple, players are using that asset, but sometimes you want to kind of combine and incentivize usage of that asset while providing a way for investors to get some revenue off of those NFT assets they're buying. And from that, you could have a rental system, or you could also have a scholarship system, like we're seeing with Axie. And something kind of interesting I see with Star Atlas and scholarship is that it's kind of has the potential to create a better better scholarship economy, where you get something closer to real employment, with users having a variety of different activities they can do based on specialized skill sets. So question for you, Michael, how do you think that an employment or scholarship model would look like in Star Atlas relative to kind of the simpler version we currently see in Axie Infinity, as you have a wide variety of potential employment options?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I've made comments in the past just surrounding the potential for kind of total GDP, and also for the potential for these enormous labor markets to form within the metaverse itself. Now, once again, I would comment that we have a gamer-centric approach first, and so you can think in terms of the different roles and career paths that people can take within Star Atlas, whether that's, being a data runner where you're flying around space and you're discovering new territories, or you're actively engaged in fighting, or maybe you're policing areas of space with a fighter ship, and serving as a security for maybe a freighter who's trying to move materials from one coordinate to another across the universe. Those can all naturally be managed by individual players, or they can be managed by a collective of players on a single ship as well. With land operations, you'll have people that are operating as miners, that are operating as logistics coordinators. You'll have CEOs of companies, which are effectively, in many cases, going to be these guild or DAC leaders. Those are just some of the career paths that people can take participating in Star Atlas gameplay. The metaverse component of itself could also translate to somebody becoming an employee in an e-commerce storefront that exists inside the metaverse, wherein real world products are being sold. Right? We've seen Nike move into Sandbox. We're seeing major brands move into metaverse in general, and it's very likely that there will need to be employees that are serving in positions in these digital storefronts necessary to help facilitate some sales. Maybe not required, but there could be a benefit there in increasing sales. So all of those are roles that individuals can play. While we're not necessarily focused on, say, the scholarship model, because our intention across Star Atlas is to ensure that asset pricing remains reasonable and inclusive. So regardless of an individual's financial position, they can still access the game. And we do that with a wide range of pricing of assets, starting anywhere from, say, $15, going all the way up to the hundreds of thousands to potentially millions of dollars range. The idea, though, is that over time, players across Star Atlas at least have an immediate low-friction entry point to get into the game. They can start to accrue wealth and compound wealth, and then continuously upgrade and improve equipment and assets that they own, and provide greater earnings potential for them going into the future. So we're not necessarily looking at the scholarship model, but I do see enormous potential for people that are looking for, say, passive income. And while that's not a mechanic that we're directly enabling, the ability to lend is where I see this emerging, right? So call it venture capital, institutional capital, any large individual buyer of these assets, building portfolios of game assets that they don't intend to utilize. Right, we're focused on gamer action-driven income. Somebody's going to have to operate that equipment, but if it's not the person that owns it, there should be a facility that is executed through Web3, through some lending protocol, wherein someone can borrow that, gain access, and then it's a split in revenue. And that can all be negotiated directly through whatever this lending platform that ultimately gets integrated, whatever that is. Does that fully answer the question? Was there anything else that I missed?
No, that covered it excellently, Michael. Thank you. Yeah, that it's going to be very interesting to see how that develops in terms of having a massive economy where users actually have an ability to be fully employed entirely within the metaverse and have a really wide variety of opportunities there. And so connecting a bit to what you said there.
Kiefer, can I make, actually, sorry, just one more comment I just want to touch on, because it is something that comes up in conversations, or has in the past, and it's this idea of, are we going to create this exploitative labor force inside the metaverse, right? People that aren't able to purchase assets and then just become this perpetual labor force for the wealthy. the reason why I don't think that will be the case, especially across Star Atlas, is that there's going to be a lot of efficiency across these labor markets. Labor will be, capital will be competing with capital in a very transparent fashion. You're essentially going to have a global job board, and people will be able to understand quite well what are the compensation levels for a given career path inside the metaverse, and they'll see that, and they'll be able to compare that against other people around the world, right? So it's whereas right now there's asymmetry to information, and also there's these geographic boundaries on where people work and operate, and as such they can actually be exploited, right? Depending on where you live, you can be exploited because you don't have opportunity. Within the metaverse, there is no boundary. You can work for anyone, and anybody can create a competitive wage for someone else, and the people that are paying competitive wages for various activities will be the ones to identify, locate, and secure the best talent across the metaverse as well.
That's a very good point. I think these are, oops, Kiva lost connection, but he'll be back. Yeah, that's a very good point, because I think when in the near future, it's not about competing just gig workers versus full-time jobs, but also on-chain versus off-chain worlds. And what we're really doing is using technology to enable more opportunities for different people to play around with. So that's great. And I think Kiva needs better connection again, so he will come back again soon. But let's move on to token design on monetary policy first with Luca, and we can come back to Kiva again later. Luca, do you have connection?
Yes, Lisa, I have connection, but I'm in a car in and out tunnels. I wouldn't mind. I'm happy to ask questions, but I would love you to facilitate the session because I don't want to be cut like Kiefer in the middle of it.
Okay. So when we talk about, so the last pillar in this entire framework is token design, which is monetary policy, how we design the tokens. And in token design, we really want to, in monetary policy, more specifically, we're trying to balance between inflationary and deflationary pressures. And we did a little case study on Axie Infinity. So Luca, can you run through with us, what does that look like how do we balance between the assets created, which is Axies in the space, and how does it affect the internal currency? Let's talk a little bit about that, and then we can look at the comparison with Star Atlas.
Yeah, thanks, Lisa. And I apologize in advance in case my connection gets cut. But as Lisa mentioned, we looked at, I think we all look at this slices of metaverse as very interesting macroeconomic exercises, right? When we simplify how the macroeconomic state model works, and we are trying to create levers that improve the engagement of all the agents and try to make a better, more equitable space for everybody to engage and provide services, being time, being resources, or anything else. And I mean, the Axie Infinity case for us was very interesting. First of all, because it was the first play to earn platform that actually got a macroeconomic level of engagement. And then because they were also thinking about it that way, we followed them through the second part of this year. And in the way they were using their two levers, their two tokens, the AXS token and the SLP token that was an internal currency. And it was interesting for us because we were seeing a tentative effort by Skymavic to grow the ecosystem, i.e. just growing the people and the resources pool within, and meaning also the monetary policy, but without creating an explosive inflation of their internal currency token. Because obviously, in the same way we could look at these metaverses as emerging economies. Like if you're growing and you're pulling a lot of resources, then your internal currency may appreciate and may actually decrease the ability for more people to come in, or actually decrease impact an effective allocation of resources within. And we are seeing this because obviously in crypto, everything is so quick and fast that things can move and can create self-destructive cycles very easily, and this could be threatening for the ecosystem as a whole. So I would be very curious to hear from you how you think about this in Star Atlas, and how you're trying to play with an expansionary levers of the economy or the ecosystem, and instead restrictive ones, then try to modulate the growth in a sustainable way to make this ecosystem survive in the long term.
So more specifically for you, Michael, so we take a step back to look at what are the various factors that affects the demand of the native token, as well as the demand of the NFTs, and what are the parameters that you have embedded in your system that allows us to change these different what are the levels in the ecosystem?
Well, there are many levers that we can pull. I will say this is one of the more sophisticated aspects of what we're building in Star Atlas. From a top-level core objective design of Star Atlas ecosystem, our first priority is, one of the reasons why we selected Unreal Engine to build this hyper-realistic cinematic quality world is that it will enable us to build a very entertaining, engaging, and immersive experience for the gamer. Right, so that's priority number one, and what we're hyper focused on in the initial years. The second component of this, though, and the cornerstone of what we're doing, is deep economic analysis, creating a circular and robust and sustainable economy in the long term. And so, one of the major pitfalls of things like play-to-earn gaming is this like purely extractive economy, wherein there's a subsidy in place, there's a inflation created through the distribution of tokens that facilitates the play to earn, but there's no further utilization of the token. So if you're creating an ecosystem where cash or value consistently flows out, that simply isn't sustainable, right? So that's one of the things that we're very focused on, is how do we retain value inside Star Atlas? Our economics department consists of the hierarchical organizational design is a chief economist. And the chief economist's role is to look at broad macroeconomic variables in a framework that that sovereign states would typically analyze this. So thinking in terms of countries, right? I would draw a distinction here between decentralized open metaverse platforms, such as the one that we're building, and more closed permission-based systems. Let's just use Meta as an example, and I will caveat and say I think Mark Zuckerberg did a really fantastic job in outlining the potential of types of experiences that can exist in the metaverse. Just ideologically, we couldn't be in more contrast. So our chief economist is thinking in terms of exactly like you said, monetary policy, fiscal policy, and general economic policy. Beneath that, we have a head of game economy. That's going to focus on internal game balance and financial incentives across gameplay loops. We have a head of token economy, and this is where you start to kind of cross the border, the line, wherein distribution of tokens that live inside Star Atlas have the immediate ability to transcend that gaming environment or that virtual world into the real world, which is the alternative financial ecosystem we all operate in across cryptocurrency. So when you have this flow of value, this exchange, you need to think of that essentially as the same as foreign exchange across countries. So do you want to retain your national domestic currency? In many cases, and in a lot of developing nations, they don't, right? Because these are hyperinflationary environments where their purchasing power is consistently devalued. So people in Venezuela, for example, are looking towards crypto like Bitcoin or trying to get into the US dollar, because at least then it retains purchasing power over time. What we need to create across Star Atlas is motivation and incentive structures wherein people actually want to retain and hold their Atlas because there's utility for it, and because purchasing power is not only maintained, but has the potential to increase over time as well. The third department is our head of monetization, which is really just looking at creative new revenue models and opportunities that can, in many ways, drive value back into the ecosystem overall. I would also just comment in thinking of terms of utility and token mechanics. There's a lot of different things that we can do. We do have a dual token system. Star Atlas or Atlas token is our medium of exchange. It's a transactional currency. It's the primary financial incentive structure. But one of the immediate steps that we take is not having inflation being unidirectional. In fact, operating across Star Atlas requires players to consistently reinvest back into themselves through the purchase of various resources to maintain their assets to continue producing income. So almost all activities in the gameplay loop are treated as kind of individual businesses of sorts with their own operating costs and expenses. That creates an interesting dynamic for our alternative token, Polis, which is the Star Atlas DAO. I think many people on the call probably understand what decentralized autonomous organizations are, but generally speaking, these are governance structures that gives rights to those governors to be able to direct things like development and design and feature requests, the future evolution of Star Atlas in our case. But they also have kind of a financial incentive to participate in that governance because they earn emissions in Polis. And in our case, we segregate revenues that are generated through all of those operating costs within the economy inside the metaverse. Those get recaptured and distributed out to DAO members, or rather, the DAO has rights to treasury management of those assets. Now, it could be distributed out directly to holders. They could be burned. They could be utilized to pay ourselves, or maybe in the future, some alternative studio to build out a specific feature. Or alternatively, they could even be invested into the community to continue growth of user base, attracting new people into the economy, which further compounds growth of GDP, and then subsequently, further increases the notional value of income that flows into the DAO. To the extent that the economy continues growing, greater value accrues to the DAO. Circling back to Atlas, not only do we have these gameplay loops where you need to reinvest some of your earnings back into your character and into your assets so you can continue playing, but then we supplement that with things like token mechanics, which includes staking contracts, right, with various incentives. And I won't get too deep into this because it's a feature that we're rolling out in Q1 with our new marketplace program, but effectively providing various benefits to holding your tokens, which is effectively the same as retaining it in, say, your national domestic currency, as opposed to exchanging it into something else that you think will retain value in a more stable format. One final point on. So I kind of lost my train of thought there, but I think I largely covered your question. Ultimately, the idea is that there needs to be growth in utility and also value in holding these assets, so that players are not motivated and inspired to, say, liquidate, but rather reinvest back into themselves for the continuous growth. I think the last thing is really just thinking about our potential for global adoption across Star Atlas. We're not thinking in the hundreds of thousands or millions of users as our demographic. There are many cohorts that will exist across our ecosystem that include the gaming audience, but there's also a major cohort that is that individual that is looking for specifically for play to earn mechanics, and we're seeing that largely that's derived largely from emerging markets and developing countries, wherein the opportunities present inside virtual worlds is substantially higher than that in working a job in the local economy. And so therefore, these become new participants that want to be actively engaged in our economy and continuously grow. We think Star Atlas, we think the metaverse itself is going to grow to billions of users. And I believe that the economic potential in an environment like ours will exceed the trillions of dollars per year basis over time. And I'm not, I'm thinking very long-term timelines here, 10 to 20 years. But, when you have a global economy inside a virtual world, it's natural to assume that that's going to exceed any individual GDP of any country. And so we're looking at collective economy around the world with billions of users.
I have a question here, and I think is might be like a very philosophical question, but I'm curious to hear your view. I think and I think you would agree with me that metaverse experiences are, at least in theory, they try to be good resource allocators, right? Resources being financial resources, being time, being effort, being expertise in some way, and probably better resource allocators because they're gamified, because they're more engaging, because they offer better experience than other stuff there is out there. So would you expect Star Atlas to compete head to head, doing exactly the same stuff but with a different twist compared to other play to earn / metaverse experiences, or do you think there's going to be some sort of specialization across the board where different solutions offer different experiences offer a better solution for certain problems? Or do you think it's going to be like an horizontal head-to-head competition on who grows to up to critical mass first?
If I interpret the question correctly, I do believe in a multiverse model for the immediate future. Again, different gaming environments are going to offer different experiences that are attractive to people for a variety of reasons. The people that are focused most specifically on income levels via play to earn will probably accrue to whichever gaming ecosystem or play to earn ecosystem delivers the best value back to them. Longer term, going into the future, I believe there's going to be a convergence of a lot of these ideas and concepts that have been determined to be most effective. So again, I don't know what that timeline looks like. We try to think in probably like 20, 50, 100-year cycles on what this is going to be. And the reason I say that is, unlike many traditional games, the potential for Star Atlas is to be this perpetually evolving product going into the future. Whether we as a studio are behind that or not at some point is not really relevant because the economic incentive mechanism is there from the foundation. It is a cornerstone of what we're building, and it's facilitated through the DAO. So once the DAO has this ability to capture revenue in perpetuity through the economy, it can decide how to invest that capital, which could be paying another studio or another developer or another content creator or another entrepreneur to come in and build something and build upon what we started with Star Atlas. And so as a result of that, I believe this is something that could live on essentially forever. That's what we're trying to accomplish here. That's the bigger vision. You create a new economy and a new ecosystem that is self-sustaining.
Great, thanks for sharing. And I think you talk a lot about the various mechanisms and how do we create this self-sustaining ecosystem. And I think Kiefer can continue on with his questions because we'll dive into these kind of incentive mechanisms. Kiefer, please.
Yeah. So one aspect that's important to look at when at the very early stage of figuring out where a game is going to go when they're exploring the P2E side is, as soon as you have money introduced in the ecosystem, what is the best way to have that be impacting the economy? Do you want to have a free-to-play game, a pay-to-play game? And the direction that goes is going to influence the way that users at different bankrolls are interacting with each other. And because kind of the difference from traditional gaming to this play-to-earn space is that now there's the potential to earn real value from gameplay, but how do you keep users at all different levels and financial situations able to be able to have a role in the space and engage with it well? So kind of the issue that brings up in some cases is some games being perceived as pay to win. And this can vary in importance depending on if a game is PvP versus PvE. Because in PvP situations, if one user is able to gain a significant advantage through having more money, it may negatively impact the experience of the lower bankroll player. And I think Star Atlas is an interesting case because it's a very detailed and in-depth economy with a variety of PvP and PvE experiences. And you mentioned earlier that you would have essentially opportunities at different price levels. But what is your general strategy in terms of managing the kind of pay-to-win idea and ensuring that this is going to be attractive?
Might have gotten cut off there. I didn't catch the tail.
I think how does this continue to be attractive to all the different kind of users in this space? How do you balance the incentives?
Yeah, I guess let me describe a little bit of the shape of the universe inside Star Atlas. So we have a three-faction system that consists of Mud, Oni, and Ooster. These are essentially human race, aliens, and sentient android beings. This kind of triangle.
Include all these users when managing that aspect.
Yeah. So we essentially have this triangular um, uh, model that creates kind of a rock paper scissors. So there's always an advantageous and disadvantageous attribute or characteristic of one of the roles that you're playing. Secondary to that is the concept of security zones throughout the universe, and everybody lands in a neutral zone, a safe space where they can learn how to navigate and play the game. The economic incentives in that zone are the lowest naturally because it's also a no risk zone. Exploring out a little bit for the adventurous, they can enter into a medium risk security space. There is PvP engagement in this space, although it's somewhat low consequence. A ship can be destroyed, but respawning will exist, and there's no character death in that zone. Economic incentives increase in this area. And then we are introducing a bit of a hardcore mode. Well, not a bit of, it is a hardcore mode into Star Atlas, wherein as you explore deep space, high risk zone, there is permanent death and NFT destruction. The way we facilitate this, or at least conceptually, as it's not done yet, is through smart contracts, wherein player assets are deposited to this escrow smart contract. And depending on the outcome of an engagement in that space, say you lose an engagement, your ship NFT is actually destroyed, and the winner of that engagement gets to recapture through salvage some of the components and maybe an ejected crew member, maybe a salvaged hull that they can rebuild as an NFT. And in addition to that kind of that PvP dynamic, all of the rarest materials and minerals and items of highest value, end game, if you will exist out there in deep space. Now, there's a variety of methods players can use to combat, say, the distribution of wealth between the player base. One, it's there's so we're creating this grand strategy game where there is a top-down view where you can navigate and control entire fleets of ships, but it does go all the way down to ground level, wherein you can actually be in first-person view, operating as the captain, operating as a pilot, operating as a gunner or an engineer, or again, any of the career paths. Individual players can actually populate a ship. And what's important for us is to be able to create some advantages and balance between operating a ship with a crew of real people versus operating a fleet of ships with crew members that consist of NPCs or AI. Um, so, that's one thing, is being able to create that balance. The second thing is forming collectives of players. Sure, an individual player might not have the same capital base as some other individual player, but collectively through guild formation, through DAX, these collectives of players are able then to compete on a broader scale and compete out in deep space. Beyond that, the universe is going to be expansive. It's going to be large, and there will be uniformity in the types of experiences, say things like missions or quests inside Star Atlas, that exist across all of those different security zones and across all of the different factions. So everybody should be able to find a path for themselves where they're both having fun and have the ability to generate income. However, I think it's natural that a player with a larger asset base is able to generate a proportionally higher amount of income for themselves, just given the capital outlay that was required to get access to that. So we don't necessarily think of it as pay to win in Star Atlas. We think there's going to be a certain degree of strategy and structure in player collectives that will enable them to compete at a higher level.
Thanks, Michael. That was very in-depth answer there, and it does do a good job of matching kind of or adding realism to it. You're able to invest more and earn a greater return from it by creating some larger or having a greater impact on the economy, and that does it adds realism, and it does have advantages for the larger bankroll players. But I think you've have the opportunity to have a really good balance by having specific ways that even smaller individuals can find their space and make their own mark on the game.
Yeah, well said. And I guess I would just point out that because I didn't mention it, but one of the positive consequences of having this concept of ship destruction is that it first and foremost that creates a deflationary mechanism, whereas existing ships that exist across the economy do get destroyed over time. And we part of our mining and crafting gameplay loop is to enable players to mint or produce through construction their own NFTs based on blueprints. So we fully enable the ability to satisfy demand through player creation of supply over time. But that also creates this um, uh, no certain dynamic of what assets are going to be in high demand and what is the availability or scarcity of any of these assets over time, because it depends on the outcome of game actions itself. The second thing that also enables is then another Web3 integration point through things like decentralized insurance, where it's very, very like you insure your vehicle that you drive in physical reality because it's of high value and you don't want to lose it and not have the ability to replace it. Well, it's very likely that people will be insuring their ships in Star Atlas such that they can purchase a replacement, even though the item won't be recreated by us or by the insurance provider. The value can be delivered back to the person purchasing insurance, which can then go back into the economy to purchase another one of these items.
Awesome. So yeah, these are different ways in the future where more activities and transactions can be created to increase more interactions between users, hence increasing the value that can be provided by Star Atlas to the community. So now with the last 12 minutes, let's open the floor to Q&A. I think there are 3 people who want to speak. The first one is Simran. Hi, Simran.
Hi Lisa, thank you for bringing me up. Just want to say this has been really, really insightful. I am a bit of a noob when it comes to the P2E gaming side of things. So I'm still trying to grasp a lot of the information that was delivered. So I mean, again, so I really apologize if some of my questions are really noob questions, but one of them was what you were talking about in just a question in me understanding the last question that was answered, and when you were talking about NFT destruction and NFTing these digital assets that are part of the game, how does this essentially and I'm just trying to understand the technical aspect, because I understand NFTs in theory, and I understand how they're being applied now, but what I think failing to bridge or create a link between is how the digital asset is then being used in the game. Does that make sense? Would you mind just expanding a little bit over that?
Sure. I mean,
go for it, Michael.
Yeah. So realistically, the NFT itself is just the digital representation of an asset on a ledger that includes the underlying metadata or characteristics or attributes of that asset, right? So it doesn't actually represent the model in the game. In our case, we build all of these models in Unreal Engine. It goes through this full production cycle of concept art, through 3D modeling and blockout and rigging it so that it can be animated and then adding visual effects to it. So all of that actually exists inside Unreal Engine. And then we just connect the dots between the two. So your asset that you own on chain, which is immutable and transparent, and everybody has access to information on full supply of that asset and any movement of that asset, they serve 2 separate functions, but we just connect the dots between the asset that you own on chain and what you're able to navigate with in engine. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's really, really cool. But how do you create that bridge? How does what you've created on Unreal Engine talk to what's on chain?
It's been a unique challenge, but I'm kind of proud to announce that our team is building what we call the Foundation SDK, the software development kit, that is the integration of Web3 protocols directly into Unreal Engine. So that's something that we'll be open sourcing, and developers of the future will be able to utilize that as a tool so they can build blockchain-based gaming as well. But it's a tool set that we're developing internally that allows communication between blockchain and Unreal Engine.
Okay, so that's freaking awesome. Like, if you could see my face, and I'm like, my mind is absolutely blowing, and I'm very excited to find out, obviously, when that's going to go live. And then the reason that is part of what interested me in joining the space in the first place is that I'm actually working on a play to earn wellness game, and it's like, we're super excited. We've just set up like a Discord for it, and I was really here just to understand like feedback and guidance, rather on how we can go about the game, like economics and design. And I took a lot of notes, in like scrappy ways about what you were talking about, because this is like all the parts that we're still exploring. So I mean, if there could be, feedback, guidance, or like, whatever tips and tricks that you could throw from your experience going through this, that would really help us as we design our play to earn wellness game. The goal really with the game is to help people improve their well-being.
Okay, sounds interesting, and definitely check out the report that we've written. And Michael has also given a lot of very interesting interviews. Everything's on YouTube, so I would definitely recommend you to check those out. Let's move on to, we have 4 other questions. So the next one is Galactic Monkey. Hi, Galactic Monkey. Galactic Monkey. All right, we'll skip you first, and we'll go to BS Vision. All right, and the other one is Ipalibo. Ipalibo? No. Okay, yes, Ipalibo. Hi, would you like to ask a question?
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yes, that's great.
Awesome. So Michael, really love what you're saying, and I'm a very passionate early fan of Star Atlas getting involved. One question I do have, so we've heard a lot about ships as the assets, and it makes sense. That's primarily how people are getting involved with Star Atlas today. But I've not heard a lot about like character assets, like how having different characters or different career paths impacts the gameplay or even your ability to earn. Could you share some insight into how you guys are thinking about how different character roles or career paths actually affect gameplay and the play to earn potential of gamers?
Yeah, it's a fantastic question. I would, in most cases, defer to our chief product officer, Danny Floyd here. He's largely the visionary behind the gameplay mechanics. What I can comment on is that, within your ship, there will be the possibility for ship configuration across various components, so things like weaponry and shields and thrusters, as well as underlying crew members. Now, should you wish to proceed with just NPCs as characters manning various positions in your ship, then you would do so through purchasing crew member cards that you would then plug into those slots. The general idea is that depending on the university that the crew member attended, and depending on their specific role, they would be exposed to character progression over time. There's also the potential for an individual player to specialize in one of these roles as well, and if that role is being a pilot, then they level up those character attributes over time and get superior stats on all of those attributes as they continue to play and gain experience. I guess
Awesome.
I would kind of close here and just say that the crew members are something that will be coming later in our development cycle. The ship NFTs preceded the launch of our first gameplay loop, which was Score. The things coming this year are enhancements to Score, but also the release of a project that we call Cream, which is a crafting, mining, and farming gameplay loop, and enabling the true circular supply chain economy that will exist in NFT creation, and then characters and ship configuration and fleet configuration would come sometime later down the roadmap.
Thank
Great.
you, Michael.
Thank you for sharing.
Can I just ask a request for the economic design group? Could you guys post the report, a link to the report on your Twitter feed? I couldn't find it on your site, and I think it may be leading to a 404 page. Thanks. I'll drop off. Thanks.
Okay. And due to time, let's have a last question, and that will be 93 Engel. Is 93 Engel available? Yes, no. All right. The next one will be Fred. Yes, Fred. Fred, you're the last question of the day.
Hello. Yeah, so my question is about the showroom. I know you mentioned the showroom was supposed to come out during Q2, but will it have any multiplayer features?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked, Fred. For anyone who's not intimately familiar with our roadmap, we do develop across two concurrent environments. We're releasing all of our initial features as a browser-based mini game. This is where Score was rolled out. This enables us to develop and deliver faster, and also test out all of the on-chain logic. So, as opposed to the way that even many purported blockchain games are building with traditional game environments, and maybe the integration of NFTs, and in rare cases the integration of digital currency, we're actually building the gameplay mechanics on chain through smart contracts as well. But that the mini game enables us to deliver these features, test them out for robustness, and obviously we do security audits, but protecting against things like that as well. Second, in addition to that, we also developed this full production pipeline in Unreal Engine. The showroom that Fred is referring to is the first module that will be rolling out this year. It's the first immersive digital environment in 3D space, wherein you can load your ship models in, you can explore the interiors, you can explore ships that maybe you're interested in purchasing, and then also execute on some of the same gameplay mechanics that are available in the browser, but will be delivered through a UI in Unreal Engine. To your actual question, yes, we're heavily focused on delivering multiplayer experience in the showroom. Again, this isn't an incredibly immersive gameplay experience. It's just the first opportunity to explore these worlds. But we do see a lot of value in being able to have private established servers for things like guilds, wherein they can host meetings and start to strategize and coordinate their activities across Star Atlas. So simply put, yes, if it's not available in the initial release of the showroom, it would come shortly thereafter, and it is an area that we're heavily focused on.
Well, thank you, Michael, for your time. Thank you for sharing everything. Just to recap what we have talked about today, we talked about how do we define the various parameters to design this robust economy. You got to start somewhere, and it's divided into three areas. The first one is market design, defining the parameters and constraints of your market. The second is mechanism design, the rules that allow interaction and the rules that's embedded as economic policies or fiscal policies in your game. And lastly, it's token design, which is the monetary policies of the token itself. It could be NFT, it could be your native tokens. With that, we have looked at the various breakdowns of what is in these different pillars and how Star Atlas has tapped into all these different aspects and how they've designed a very robust system. So thank you everyone for joining. Thank you, Michael, for joining. Do you have any last words you want to part us with?
No, I really enjoyed the discussion today. Thanks for having me here on the Twitter Spaces. And what I would just communicate in closing is we have an incredibly supportive community across Star Atlas. If you're not already a member, we'd welcome you to join us on Twitter and Telegram, or where some of the most engaging conversation happens is in Discord, and that's just discord.gg/staratlas. So would love to welcome you into the community. There's a lot of very helpful members who can help bring you up to speed on everything that's taken place over the last year and what's coming up. And we do also host regular, we call them town halls, but they're, these are kind of periodic updates every 2 weeks in Discord as well, where we give you an update on our progression of development. So really appreciative of the community that we have now, and would love to welcome some new people to it.
Thank you, Michael. And for everyone else who's staying, for the report, you can go to econteric.com/P2E. That's econteric.com/P, the number 2 and E. Well, thank you, everyone. We have reached our time, and we'll speak again next week where we have the next session. Goodbye.
Thanks so much. Bye.